Welcome to another edition of Just a Voice on Main Street. I'm Gary Sutton, host of The Gary Sutton Show, heard weekdays on WOYK Radio, that's 1350 AM, and also 98.9 FM. You can also catch me on a regular basis out there talking about the Main Street of America and York County every single day. And as I get out there and I hear the voices in York County, one of the voices that has spoken out has been a guy named Ted Czech. He is a former reporter in news. He says he's a recovering reporter, but he's written a book that really kind of raises the consciousness, I think, of what's happening in news media around the world and around the country right now, called Saving the Beast. A recovering reporter reflects on America's broken media and how to fix it. And we meet up today with Ted Czech right here on Main Street America and Main Street York County. Ted, great to have you aboard. And hold that book up, because a lot of people need to see that on the shelves.
There we go.
Saving the Beast, a recovering reporter reflects on America's broken media and how to fix it. And Ted, you were a reporter some years ago. Tell people a little bit about your background and where you come from on writing this book.
Sure. So first of all, 25 years. I spent 25 years as a newspaper reporter, both here in York, mainly in York, for more than 20 years, and covering crime and emergency news. So a lot of breaking news, fires, accidents, shootings, all that kind of stuff. But 4 years ago, I left the profession to pursue public relations, as a lot of us end up doing. We go over to what we call the dark side. And so I joke about recovering reporter. And I got that from somebody else, Sarah Connolly, who's she taught me a lot about being a public information officer. And I think she might have gotten it from somebody else. But recovering reporter, it's a tongue-in-cheek phrase about that somehow now that I've left journalism, I'm in the detoxification, and will continue to forever, because it wasn't really traumatic, but it's just a joke about all that.
When we think about the media, we think about objectivity, we think about professionalism, we think about the fact that that's kind of what they owed us in the beginning, being the fourth estate, checking on all the institutions in our country, keeping the truth out front and center, away from some of the politicians in government. We had that at one time, or did we? Tell me a little bit about the history of that and the fact that that's what we were shooting for at one point in time, an objective, professional kind of media.
Well, excuse me. To me, objectivity is something that you can never truly attain, because we are only human, and we make mistakes and we have biases, whatever they may be. But to the best of your ability as a reporter, you need to take off your opinion hat and put on your journalist hat. Be a professional. Do your job. That is what I say in the book, and so that's what I believe that reporters should always be striving for. That's what I call the pursuit of true journalism, which is not what we see for the most part nowadays. But if you just quickly go back in the history of things, we at one point, say the era of Walter Cronkite,
right?
I call him America's grandpa, because you believed everything that he said, and I don't know that was correct either, because now we're at the point where we've endured this loss of innocence, shall we say, where we don't believe much of anything that we hear, and I think that's actually a good thing, because now we're using critical thinking, and we're saying, I don't know if I necessarily believe this, so I'm going to do some further research and see what else I can find, and then I'll form my opinion from there. And I think truly that's what journalism is. You lay out all the facts for people, or at least everything that you know as a reporter at that moment in time. You lay it all out there for them, and you allow the American public, who's not dumb, as some would as I believe that some journalists, sitting in their ivory towers, think that they are, but they're not dumb, and they can use their critical thinking to examine what they're reading or what they're seeing.
A healthy skepticism, I think, is what you're talking about here, and that we all should be healthily skeptic about what we hear and see. You talk in your book about a covenant that once existed between the readers or the listeners and also the news preparers, the people who were the reporters like you. There was a covenant. There was kind of a promise between the two of you. and that somehow that got violated. Talk a little bit about that, because that's the very crux of your book.
Right. That's the first section of it. Is I kind of trace that, what I believe is kind of the nexus or the perfect storm, if you will, of how that the groundwork was laid for the media losing credibility with the American public. So I look at, I'd say it was improper vetting or incomplete vetting of newspaper reporters, mainly. And I focus on that because that was my bread and butter was newspapers. So I look at a number of reporters, starting with Janet Cook. People may recall her name. She wrote a story. It won the Pulitzer Prize. That's the top prize in journalism. And she was at the time employed by the Washington Post, which is either number one or number two in most people's minds as a top newspaper in the country. New York Times, Washington Post. So she wrote this story about a heroin addict, a little boy. Turned out the whole thing was fabricated, the entire thing. So I think newspapers and all media outlets need to do a better job of screening, vetting the character. Look at the character of the individual that you're hiring, because we've seen a number of these people, these charlatans. But that's just one thing. The other thing I talk about is, excuse me, the rise of sensationalism in journalism, and we saw that eons ago with yellow journalism, but it rose up again in the I would say the early 90s. And various people have put it at different points, whether it was the first televised police chase in Los Angeles, whether it was the O.J. Simpson incident where he was doing the slow police chase, whether it was the Pee Wee Herman incident. People have pinpointed at different areas, but kind of right in that is a few years worth,
right?
Where that's where that occurred. This rise in sensationalism. I even remember I grew up in Rhode Island. There was a news director of one of the local stations, and he said that the American public, his audience, was getting dumb and dumber, by the minute, or just words to that effect. Really, disappointing to hear that. So those are some of the things that I look at, and also the rise in the way that young journalists, students at colleges and universities, are being taught. They're not being taught to be, as you say, objective, fair, accurate, balanced, timely. They're being somehow given, it seems, the moral latitude to choose a side in a straight news story, choose a side, and then advocate for that side in their reporting. That's not true journalism.
There's a sense today, and of course we talk about the beast. We're talking about the media being the beast here, and we're going to get to the point of, is it worth saving, or do we have to try to reinvigorate it in some way? But you look back to some of the points in time. I think about the Watergate reporting that Woodward and Bernstein did in Watergate, and we see that in the movie All the President's Men, read about in the book by Woodward, where it looked like a pretty good piece of journalism, where they had to go out, they were following it, they weren't quite sure where it was going to go, but it eventually led to Nixon covering up the bugging of the Democratic National Headquarters at Watergate. And they go through the whole story, and they talk about how they have to triple source, that the evidence they have isn't good enough, and Ben Bradley, who's the editor of the paper at the Washington Post, sends them back time and time again to get more proof, because they are making some accusations there. They're making a story, and it looks like a pretty good objective kind of reporting for the most part that you can see going through there.
Right.
It seems to me that a lot of students who came later on looked at that and said, oh, I can change the presidency, I can change the country, instead of getting the real thing, which this is how you do journalism, by objective kinds of gathering of information, double and triple sourcing it, making sure it's right before you go ahead and print it. And instead what they got out of it was, oh, I can be a star. I can get out there and report, maybe bring down a president. Am I right on that? Is that kind of the wrong lesson that got taken away from that whole time?
No, I think you are right. And I think we see that manifested more recently with the Hunter Biden laptop. Take a look at the laptop from hell, as it's been known. That was a story that should have been as big as Watergate, but it wasn't, because it got buried. The media actually willfully buried that story. We just had Catherine Maher, who's the CEO of NPR. She was before Congress, just I believe it was last week. She admitted that yes, NPR should have covered that story,
right,
and they didn't cover that story, and they knew that they weren't doing it, weren't pursuing true journalism, and also there was some. The New York Post was the entity that actually broke the story, and nobody else followed suit, or very few followed suit. And that, it's been said, and I don't know if it could ever be proven, but that had the American public had a wider audience known about the laptop from hell, that it could have swayed the election of 2020.
We're in a day and age of sidism. We are tribal. We run off to our sides and we say, okay, this is my guy. Anything he says, I'm following. This is my guy over here. Anything he says, I'm following. Anything this guy says over here on the other side, he's an idiot. He has to be bad. Anything this guy says over here, it's got to be bad.
Right.
We're in this really simplistic time where we seem to be playing mental checkers where we should be playing chess. And we should be looking at it and saying, forget it. I'm not following anybody. I've got this healthy skepticism. I'm looking at the situation, and I want to try to get the very best out of it, whether it's policy, whether it's a right or wrong kind of situation like you're talking about here. We seem to have run off to our corners now. And we have a media that the perception is it's fairly liberal overall in the national media. How did we get like that? Why? Was it just they went in and they indoctrinated instead of tried to teach objectivity? Or what happened along the way there as you chronicle that in your book?
That's the thing that puzzles me, because Christiane Amanpour,
yes,
who I mentioned in the book, we actually went to the same school. She went to University of Rhode Island, and she was taught there. That's where I would guess she learned the craft of journalism. Right. And then a few years later, that's where I went. So I would guess that more than likely she was taught very similar things that I was. So something happened after that to her, to where she can stand before a crowd at Columbia and talk about a term that I don't know where this came from. It's just a made-up term called both sides-ism. This is what an ism is not a you don't want to be labeled as an ism. So they're calling objectivity both sides-ism, but that is actually the essence of journalism. You want to present both sides, or however many sides there are to an issue. Objectivity is not a dirty word. That's what I say in the book here. But somewhere along the way, Christiane Amanpour and others like her were corrupted. There's no other way to put it, no other way to sugarcoat it. And something changed, and so I think now we need to somehow turn that back around. We need more whistleblowers, and we can get into that, because that's the right. third part of the book is what the media could do to turn this around if they wanted. It's
a shame today that we even need whistleblowers. The idea that you have a grave responsibility when you go in to say, okay, I've got feelings about this, but I've got to divorce those right here because I'm reporting on a story. I'm reporting on something that's going on. One of the great things that happened back in the 50s and 60s, I think, the people like Cronkite, the people like John Chancellor, people like that, there were three main networks, all right? And we heard the three networks and we said, oh, the news sounds pretty much the same. I mean, there may be a little twinge here and there, but it sounded pretty much the same. There wasn't and this is how you should believe it kind of aspect to it, or this is how you should see it kind of aspect, the opinion journalism that we have now, or somehow in some minute way indicate what side you were on. Today, we've got all kinds of stuff on our smartphones. We've got people who portray themselves as journalists. They're nothing more than people sitting in a basement somewhere putting out news that they particularly believe in. We've got people on the major networks today who have obviously a side. We've got people on the CNNs and the Foxes and all those MSNBCs who have obviously a very big point of view to make, who are portraying themselves as journalists, not the op-ed people with the show, but the journalists. So it's gotten altogether different. When you went into reporting something, how did you take the feelings out of that? How did you take out the biases out of that to the extent that you could? Yeah,
that's just something that's drilled into you, or was, I should say, in J school, journalism school. Like I said, earlier that you take off your opinion hat. You might be covering an event or an issue that you don't particularly agree with, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
Your opinion doesn't matter. You've got to get the story done, and you have a duty to your audience to present that in the best way possible, in the most complete, most professional, objective, fair way possible. But you were talking about. I think you kind of alluded to this, where we're now at the point where we're retreating to our own echo chambers. That's where we've become. We're so split. We go to the websites that reflect back to us what we already believe in, and therefore that makes us feel even more strongly about what we believe in. But I think, and I make this point in the book, that we're in a paradigm shift right here. We're at a pivotal point in history, in journalism history, and history overall, that people are going, and I say this, people are taking their time and their money and they're going elsewhere. They are leaving the mainstream media. The mainstream media is hemorrhaging viewers, readers, and ultimately money. And then where you see the effects of that is the layoffs. And every time they do, this major outlet, that major entity, they're getting rid of 50 people, 100 people, 200 people. That's what happens. And that's what I feel needs to continue to happen in order for them to get the message. Money is the ultimate motivator. And so they need to lose enough money to be like, you know what? Maybe I need to change. Maybe I'm the problem.
And we're seeing that on some of the networks where people are not buying the products. That's the lifeblood is advertising. Right. You're seeing a lot of people taking out reporters. We see CNN, MSNBC losing a lot of reporters right now. We're talking with Ted Czech this morning, author of Saving the Beast, a recovery report reflects on America's broken media and how to fix it. So let's enter with the whistleblowers now. Seems to me that the whistleblowers are the people who are now correcting the people who should be doing the job of reporting objectively. They're the ones who are now saying, here's what happened. Here it is. Just the facts, as they used to say, the old dragnet thing back in the 50s. Just the facts, man. And they are becoming the journalists that should be doing that job in the first place, thus whistleblowers. And there seems to be more of a proliferation of them than we've had in a long time. Your thoughts on that, Ted? Well,
the most significant one, the one I focus here in the book, is Yuri Berliner. He was employed by NPR, and he I believe he was a business editor for a long time, probably about 20 years or so. He finally came forward, not through NPR, but he wrote an essay for a website that's owned by Bari Weiss, who was one of the Twitter, the people who got a hold of the Twitter files when Elon first took over X.
Right.
So Bari has her own website. Yuri Berliner wrote a story for that website, and he said that NPR had swung too far to the left, so that it doesn't represent their audience, or it doesn't represent America anymore. To a person, everybody on board at NPR is liberal, Democrat, whatever you want to call it, and excuse me, and all of the products that they're producing are left leaning, and he said he couldn't handle it anymore, I guess. And actually, he was put on leave for a week, and then in that time, and I'm kind of speculating here, but he kind of saw the writing on the wall and said, "You know what? I'm out." Yeah. And he left on his own. He was not fired by them, but he exposed them, and it took a lot of courage to do so. And I think it was, but it was also very enlightening that he came forward.
I think Americans want to trust. We don't trust a lot of our institutions here at the moment for a lot of different reasons. But this one institution that we thought we could trust to get it to us straight, we're having a tough time with. So what we're left with now is we go to our tribe's side. Conservatives go to Fox News. Right. Liberals go to MSNBC. Right. It just seems, that's a general thing. Not everybody does that, but I'm saying as a general perception, that's where we're at right now. And so we want to come back and we want to trust again. Can we do that in the Beast? Can we do that in the media as we once laid it out, that was supposed to be this objective watchdog, fourth estate of what was going on in our country? Or do we have to just destroy the model we have right now and start over again? Where do you sit on that?
Well, when I read a piece about something and where an individual, the writer, has a problem with something, I always want to hear what their solution is going to be. I need that resolution. Well, how would you change it? How would you make it better? How would you improve it? So in the third section of the book, I talk about that. What the media could do. But like I was saying, I think we're in the midst of a paradigm shift where people are leaving the mainstream media and they're seeking alternate sources for their news in independent and citizen journalists. So we've got that happening. But I like to remain positive and that there's hope out there that the mainstream media could turn things around, because I think we would like that. We would like to feel that we can, access all media and, by and large, I mean, yes, we've had the loss of innocence, but, we'd like to go to the mainstream media and think, okay, let me at least give them a chance and listen to this and then use that as a jumping off point. Whereas right now people are just scrapping it all together. So in that third section of the book, there's a plan that I lay out. And it talks about the first thing, and it might sound kind of goofy or rudimentary, but apologize. Say,
Wow.
You know what? We're sorry. We're sorry. And then the second part, we're sorry for ascribing to certain ideologies, willfully disregarding certain big stories, taking the bait on other things when we kind of maybe had an idea
Should
that
have checked it out, maybe.
Yeah. We didn't do our due diligence. We thought maybe this was a hoax, but we're going to run with it anyway because the thirst to be first is out there. I talk about that too. The thirst to be first. You want to break stories, but you've got to do it the right way.
Right.
So we're sorry, and then the old phrase about you're going to talk the talk. Now you got to walk the walk. So we're sorry, and guess what? We're not going to do it again. We're not going to do that again. We're going to move forward, and we're going to be better. So that's number one. And there's a whole prescription that Dr. Ted lays out. There's other things in there. Teaching journalism the right way, which we talked about. One that's close to my heart because I covered crime news. I was a crime reporter for more than 20 years. So covering crime the right way. Part of the reason why I left journalism was because I was told, you know what, you're not going to use mugshots anymore because that's not fair to certain groups. It's like, you know what, that's not why I'm covering crime. I'm not looking at people. I'm not looking at names or anything. I'm looking at the crime.
Right.
What crime was committed, and then I go from there.
And what are the specifics about that? And you were doing that. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden we start to work in all these other things that are the social injustices, and
right.
It doesn't.
It goes back to
well.
Situational awareness, a term that I learned in being a PIO. Situational awareness, being aware of what's around you, so that you can better handle the situation. People need situational awareness too. They need to know about the robbery that happened down the street or the shooting that happened over here. And I was told, we're not going to really cover that anymore.
Wow.
And we're not going to use mugshots, and we're not going to cover the day-to-day crime, even though it rose to these are all like felonies that I was covering. These are all serious crimes.
Saving the Beast, a recovery report reflects on America's broken media and how to fix it. You're a voice on Main Street right now, calling out in the wilderness, and hopefully people are going to get a chance to read this. You can go to Amazon.com to find it.
Yes.
You can download part of it and get an idea of it, but it's really worth the read. Ted Czech, Czech, with us today here. Ted, thanks for writing the book. I think we need to have our consciousness raised again and get back to the idea of, can the beast be saved, or does it need to be changed altogether? Maybe getting back to honesty isn't that hard a thing if somebody can be the first to step off the merry-go-round. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Ted Czech, author of Saving the Beast. Check it out today. It's on Amazon. Ted Czech, the author. And again, isn't that what we want on Main Street? The objectivity of news that we can